To the announcement by the Prime Minister today, Labor's Jim Chalmers is holding a news conference responding to those changes.
Commit to a hard September snapback in the first place. If the Prime Minister's instincts were followed through on, that would have been catastrophic for people, for workers, for jobs, for businesses and for communities right around Australia. It is a welcome change of heart from the Prime Minister that he doesn't intend to carry through on his original commitment of a hard September snapback, which would have destroyed even more businesses and destroyed even more jobs and therefore destroyed even more lives. We want to see the government do a much better job rolling out this new phase of government support than they did rolling out the first phase. We shouldn't forget that every single Australian left out of the original JobKeeper program is still left behind in this new iteration of the program. We shouldn't forget that the government has now fessed up to borrowing $6 billion to overpay some Australians, while other Australians were unnecessarily excluded from the scheme. JobKeeper has done some good in the economy. It's a good idea, but it's been badly implemented. Too many people have been left out and left behind, and the government's missed an opportunity today to fix some of those obvious errors with the original scheme. So the test of what the government's announced will be what happens to jobs in particular and what happens to the businesses which create those jobs. It is very troubling to see the Treasury forecasts released today and what the Reserve Bank Governor has said at the same time about unemployment, even with these steps being taken, rising in the September quarter, rising in the December quarter and being too high for too long. The government has made an announcement today about the extension of 2 programs, but they still haven't come up with a plan for jobs in the recovery. Australians shouldn't have to wait until the October budget before we hear from the government about what they intend to do in the longer term for jobs and the recovery so that people aren't left behind and so that people can genuinely get ahead in this economy. That's why Thursday we need to see a proper budget update, not another marketing exercise. We need to see 4 years of forecasts and we need to see a plan for jobs and the recovery. We need to know from the government what their expectations are for how bad this recession will get, how much debt will be piled up to add to the record debt which was already there before the crisis, and how high unemployment will be for how long. Those kinds of updates, a proper, comprehensive update, is long overdue. That's what we need to see on Thursday. Katie's got a bit to add about all of that, as well as in relation to the JobSeeker changes.
Thanks, Jim. Just a couple of things. Over the past 5 months, taxpayers have spent about $130 billion in keeping our community safe, in supporting families and in maintaining jobs. This has been crucial support. Today, the government announced a further $20 billion in extending some of those crucial programs with JobKeeper and JobSeeker. But what we also learned today is that about a quarter of those on JobKeeper earned more through receiving JobKeeper payments than they would normally have earned. Now, that's up to about $6 billion over the 6 months of this program. When we're looking at the amount of deficits and debt going forward that this community is going to have to deal with over the longer term, it's critical that every single dollar spent of taxpayer funds is targeted in a way that delivers particular outcomes. For example, to keep the unemployment queue as low as it can be and to make sure that we're creating jobs for people to go back into who've lost them over the past couple of months. Now, we do have concerns that that $6 billion could have been targeted in a better way. Perhaps it could have looked to support those shorter-term casuals that are raising families that were excluded, Donata workers, university staff. We've got early childhood educators who were kicked off just 2 days ago. Hospitality, arts, entertainment workers, all who have been shifted either into no income support or onto the JobSeeker line. We also know that JobSeeker has doubled. The numbers on the unemployment queue, the New Start payment, JobSeeker, has doubled over the past few months. We've gone from just over 800,000 Australians to 1.6 million Australians. Now, Labor has been saying for over a year, well before COVID-19 pandemic, that $40 a day wasn't enough to live on, that there could be, that figure needed to be increased, and that it was the government's job to do the work to deliver that payment increase. In terms of the announcements today around the refining of the JobKeeper payment, look, we are broadly supportive of those. We need to have a look at the detail and work through that over the next few days. But the government failed to take the opportunity to rule out going back to $40 a day. This should be an easy task for the government in these difficult times when families are struggling to pay bills, to put food on the table, to find work if they're unemployed. This is what the government needs to do. They need to come up with a plan around jobs and the recovery, but they also need to come up with a long-term solution to what they're going to do for people who rely on New Start to bring up, to make ends meet, and they failed to do that today. So we would say to the government, do the work, rule out the $40 per day snapback, get Treasury to do the work sooner rather than later that comes up with a permanent solution to the New Start payment. Don't kick the can down the road and hope for the best. People who rely on New Start deserve the certainty that a permanent increase would afford them. And so we would urge the government to deal with that, certainly, if not in the budget, by the end of the year.
Mr Chalmers, do you think there's a disincentive issue around the step down and the way that interacts with the JobSeeker payment?
Well, it remains to be seen. I saw that the Prime Minister was asked about this in his press conference earlier on today. We just want to make sure that the payments are carefully calibrated. We want to make sure that they're sufficient to prevent unemployment being too high for too long. The government has been sitting on the Treasury review now for almost a month. So if those issues are there when it comes to work incentives, it's for the government to give us comfort that they have not replaced one set of problems with another.
Just confirming if you're comfortable with that coronavirus supplement going from $550 to $250.
Oh, look, we've said that we want to make sure that there's an increase to the JobSeeker payment, a permanent increase above the $40 a day where the current permanent rate is. That's our highest priority, and we think the government missed an opportunity today to give millions of Australians some clarity about what the future of the JobSeeker payment looks like. As Katie said, in many ways they have kicked the can down the road, and people deserve more than that. They deserve more certainty than that, and they deserve more than $40 a day.